Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Heart of Stone, which is episode 14 of season 3 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video I cover the third season episode, Heart of Stone. So Heart of Stone is the episode in which Kira and Odo are in a runabout chasing after a Maquis, and they go to this cave where Kira's foot gets stuck in this crystal, and the crystal keeps growing and spreading, and Odo tries everything to try to stop it, but is unable to do so, and eventually it encompasses her whole body and is about to completely overwhelm and kill her, and she is telling Odo to leave, but Odo says he can't leave because he is in love with her, and she responds by saying, well, I also too am in love with you. And then he's quiet, he thinks about it, and then he calls out all these other inconsistencies and mistakes that have been happening ever since they arrived on the planet, and then points the phaser at her and says, I know for a fact Major Kira is not in love with me, and she wouldn't lie to me about this. Therefore, you are not Kira. Tell me who the hell you are right now, or I'll kill you. And she smiles the evil smile and turns into the changeling, the female changeling, and says that she wanted to suspected that Odo was in love with Kira and wanted to make him think that Kira was dead so that he would eventually return to the Great Link. And Odo's like scoffs at that, and then she tells him where he can find the real Kira, so he takes the real Kira and leaves. And when Kira asks him how he figured out that it was the changeling and what she said that tipped him off, he said, oh, nothing, just the slip of a tongue. Also, we get a side plot with Nog deciding that he wants to join Starfleet, and nobody believes him at first. They think he's joking. He gets upset and he's adamant, but Cisco wants to know why he wants to join Starfleet and refuses to give him a recommendation until he figures this out. And finally he grabs him and yells at him and shakes him, and Nog tells him it's because he doesn't want to end up like his father, because his father's an engineering genius yet is just toiling around some useless bar and being pushed around by his brother because he's not a good Ferengi, and Nog doesn't want to end up like that because he knows that he too does not have the lobes for business. So Cisco says, I will give you that chance, and then is going to write the recommendation for Nog to join Starfleet. When he tells Quark about this, Quark forbids him to go, but Rom says, in the bar you might be in charge, but with my son I'm in charge. And Quark's like, okay, fine, you tell him he can't go. And Rom says, good luck. I'm very proud of you. I would be very proud to have a son in Starfleet. So, where do I start with this episode? So, let's start with the Delta Flyers. I've been mentioning this podcast a lot because Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wrong from Voyager are going through every episode of Deep Space Nine, and they have guests on, either Armin Shimmerman or Terry Farrell, and sometimes they even add in a third guest on occasion. And it's been a very educational, enlightening. I get a lot of sort of the insider information from listening to us, and it's very interesting to get their opinions on the episodes. And this episode marks the end of when I will be able to watch that podcast in preparation for my review, because I'm going to surpass them. In the very next episode, which I'm going to make my video for later on today, they have yet to put their review out. And so I'm going at a much faster rate, so I knew it was inevitable, because they do one episode a week. I do 2 or 3 episodes a week, so it was inevitable that I would catch up and surpass them. So from now on, I won't see their podcast until well after I've made my review for the video, which is a shame, because I really feel like I need to call out Armin Shimmerman's nitpicks, and sometimes Robert Duncan McNeil. Sometimes the two of them are in agreement about something they think is faulty with the episode, and sometimes I disagree with their criticisms, and sometimes it's not so much I disagree with them as much as they're just flat up objectively wrong about what they're saying. And I'll miss being able to come here and correct them. And so they had a lot of incorrect nitpicks about this episode, so I can do it one last time, call them out on the record, make a correction on their corrections. I will say, if you want to follow me on Blue Sky, the link should be in the description below. I'm probably going to continue there. I'll do whenever I watch a podcast from Delta Flyers and they have these nitpicks that are factually incorrect or that I disagree with, I'll make a post about it on Blue Sky from now on. I'll call it Delta Flyer Corrections, or maybe I should call it Delta Flyer Nitpick Corrections, or Delta Flyer Corrections, something like that. And and I'll correct the record for anyone who's interested. Maybe, if it's relevant to an episode I happen to be reviewing, even though it will be about a past episode I've already reviewed because I'm ahead of them. But if it's relevant to the one I'm reviewing, I might call it out in my video too. But I'll go on Blue Sky, so you can follow me on there if you're interested. Now, as for this episode, thank God, they had a lot of nitpicks that were just flat out wrong. So the biggest one, to me, which screamed you're factually incorrect, is Armin Shimon was saying, okay, so there's a time where they're going and they're chasing the Maquis ship, and they scan for life signs, and they scan for life signs. So when you scan for life signs, you can detect what kind of life sign it is. You see, because this Maquis wasn't actually a Maquis, it was the changeling. Therefore, when they scan for life signs, they should have detected it was a changeling. Plot hole! Actually, no. You're wrong. Sorry, Armin, but you're wrong. So, and I understand that, he hasn't seen every episode 10 or 12 times like I have, and so might not remember this. And Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wong, to their credit, have yet to see future episodes beyond this point, so they wouldn't know. Because after this episode, it is very clearly stated, and I believe this is in the episode Adversary. It's either that or Homecoming, Paradise Lost. But I think it's Adversary. One of those episodes, Odo specifically states that when you use your sensors, your scanners, to scan for changeling, whatever that changeling is, the shape that they're taking at the moment, is what the scanners will detect. His direct quote, he says, if you scan me while I'm a rock, you will detect a rock. Or actually, it's paraphrasing, but close to a direct, because I don't remember his exact phrasing, but that's basically what it says. When you scan me as a rock, you'll detect a rock. Therefore, i.e., henceforth, if the changeling was impersonating a human or other Federation species as the Maquis, and they scanned the Maquis ship, they would detect a human! Because it's been established. I was going to say already, to be fair, it hadn't been established yet, to be fair. But Armin Shimmer's seen the rest of the series, so he should know this. But Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wong haven't, so I can get there. And I wonder if they're going to address this. I wonder when they get to the episode where Odo has that quote, if they're going to be like, oh shit, no, I was wrong. Probably not. They're probably not going to remember, or even if they do, probably not going to be humble enough to admit they're wrong. Maybe. I don't know. I think it's more over that they're not going to remember. But, therefore, it actually is not a plot hole and actually makes complete, utter, and total sense. Now, I'm trying to remember what other nitpicks, because they had several nitpicks in this episode, and I was like, okay, I remember one. One was when Kira was shooting herself the rock in the foot with the phaser. Quark is like, well, since we know what that is now, that it's not actually a rock, and it's actually the changeling. When Kira, who is the changeling, shot basically herself in the foot, it should have hurt. It should have actually damaged her, because it's not a rock. That rock is a part of her. It's a changeling, so it should be like if Odo turned around and shot himself in the foot, it should have the same effect. Several things I gotta say about that. First of all, Kira, the changeling, is the one holding the phaser, so what makes you think she has it at a harmful setting? She could have very easily put it at a setting that's essentially a light show that actually does nothing. And Odo wouldn't know that. It's not like he's a phaser expert and can tell just by looking at it. In fact, he never uses a phaser before. Something I'll get to shortly. It comes up again. So that's a very easy explanation. Another explanation is that perhaps when she takes the form of a rock, she has the same sort of consistency as a rock, because as I already stated, the sensors detect a rock when they're a rock. So that part of her that was shapeshifted into a crystal was essentially a crystal, and so she could have formed it. And because she's a very skilled shapeshifter, as we see in this episode, she should have formed it that the substance that she was emulating was immune to phaser fire. Now that one's a bit of more of a stretch, but I can definitely see that holding. Personally, I prefer the first explanation. I think that makes more sense to me, that she just had the phaser on a very low setting that made it look like she was shooting. I mean, why couldn't that be the case? Let's hear counter arguments for that, Armin. Anyway, and I really wish, because Garrett Wang will often play devil's advocate and sort of fight back against some of these nitpicks, and sometimes he does a good job, to be fair. Sometimes he says exactly what I'm thinking. I'm like, thank you, Garrett. But in this episode, he fell short. I was like, come on! Now, the first complaint makes sense because he hasn't seen future episodes yet, like I said, so he wouldn't know that. Armin should know better, though. And in this case, yeah, he kind of... I think, if I remember correctly, this is the one Garrett was like, oh yeah, you're right, there's absolutely no excuse for this. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? There's plenty of excuses for this. There's plenty of easy explanations as to why this didn't affect Odo. Now, trying to remember, so they had huge problems with Armin kept calling it the B story just because he's biased towards Ferengi, which I get. He played Quark after all, but still, it's not the B story. It is the A story. Regardless of how much you like Ferengis, Armin, it's still the A story. And this BS with Nog, which I actually have way more issues with that storyline, but don't you worry, I'll get to that one soon. That is the B story. So, and I'm trying to think. So I think part of the other issues, the phaser. So at the end, when Odo figures out that it's not Kira, he pulls a phaser and points it at the changeling, at Kira. And Armin's like, oh my god, this defies continuity, because Odo clearly states that he never in his life used the weapon and never will, so this defies it. This breaks continuity. This is completely out of character for Odo. Counterpoint. Oh, also, no, before I get to the counterpoint, another complaint was that, I think Garrett brought this part off, he pointed at the woman he loves. Not only has he never used a phaser and vowed not to, he's pointing it at the woman he loves. So, counterpoint. If we're to believe this episode, which I have some issues with, but I'll get to my issues later. But for the moment, let's take the episode at its word. That Odo is convinced that this is someone who's lying to him and not Kira, then I think it makes all this fucking sense in the world that he would point a phaser. If not only is it not Kira, it's implied that whoever this is actually did something to Kira, which, oh no, you don't fucking do that. And not only that, so this, whoever this is that's imitating Kira, possibly killed Kira, possibly hurt her, and is actively lying to Odo, trying to get him to leave Kira behind. And again, this is where you bring up the love aspect. Someone he loves, someone is trying to convince him to let someone he loves die, and possibly killed someone he loves. So fuck yeah. Fuck yes, he would put I don't care about any of his, oh, I don't like using weapons or all that, blah, blah, blah. Everyone has a limit, a line that can be crossed, that if they cross it, then, yeah. Everyone has a line, and she crossed the line, and it was an extreme situation, so 100%. Of course Odo would use a phaser in this. I mean, I think it's kind of ridiculous to think that he wouldn't. But that's just my humble opinion. So, now that I've sort of corrected the issue, or corrected the record on these false nitpicks, which I think are either incorrect or I just disagree with them. I think all three of them, well, alright, that last one was more of a disagreement, the phaser thing, but the first two, they're objectively wrong about it. Especially the first one. But now that I addressed those, let's get to my actual complaint. The nitpick I have, or the mistake that I see in this episode, the one thing that I don't buy, which is different than what they pointed out, is, and again, this is coming from the perspective of having seen future seasons as well. Also having just recently watched season 3, the episodes that came before this. When Odo says, oh yeah, you're definitely not Kira. You're definitely lying to me because you told me that you loved me. And Kira definitely, I examined her very careful. She thinks of me as a close friend, but she definitely doesn't love me, so you're lying to me. And then Kira is like, well, maybe I just said that to make you feel better. And he's like, the real Kira would never do that. Yes, she would. Of course she would. I don't buy that at all. Yes, I know that Kira and Odo have the kind of relationship where they usually like to shoot straight with each other, but let's, for the moment, assume that this situation is as it appears, and that Kira is encompassed in this crystal, which they tried everything to try to break, and they can't get it to break. Meanwhile, the cave they're in is collapsing, and it could kill Odo at any time. And Odo professes his love to her as a reason for why he can't leave. 100% Kira would lie to him and say, yes, I love you too, now get out of here. 100%. So I think he's flat out wrong about that. But not only that, this whole thing about, oh, Kira definitely isn't in love with me, therefore I know you're not the real Kira, I don't buy that either. And especially, again, if you take on what we know, future spoilers, about what happens in the last 2 seasons of the show when Odo and Kira become a couple and are in fact in love with each other, you look back at this and say, this doesn't match. Odo's obviously wrong, because it seems like not only is Odo saying, oh, you're definitely not Kira, it seems like the episode is confirming like Odo's suspicions that, oh yeah, Kira definitely doesn't love Odo. It's like the episode would have you to believe that he's 100% correct, when in fact everything from my perspective makes it look like he's dead wrong. Now, hear me out. So I know that just because Kira gets into a romantic relationship with Odo a couple years later, doesn't mean at this particular point in time that she is in love with him and would confess love for him. But there's a difference between, I mean, that's true, I will allow you that. Like, maybe she wouldn't, be in love with him, and maybe Odo's correct that she's not in love with him. But he's so certain that Kira could never love him so much that he thinks that it's not the real Kira. And that's where I gotta call bullshit. Because here's what I see from my perspective. And I've talked about this a bit as I've been going through season 3. We get episodes like The Search and Meridian, where Odo and Kira interact. And was it? I can't remember which. And Second Skin, maybe. What was The Abandoned was the episode where Kira showed up at his quarters and gave him a housewarming present with the plant, and he put it in the bucket, and she seemed very happy and pleased, and it was like being very, like, all her behavior in all these episodes that came before. And I mentioned this before, it doesn't seem like, with their interactions, it doesn't seem like Odo has a crush on Kira. It seems like Kira has a crush on Odo, obviously. Honestly, to me. But, I am not an expert in love. Lord knows that's the truth. So, I could be wrong about that. But I think at the very least, if Kira isn't in love with Odo, which everything else in the show would indicate that's the case, particularly this episode, so let's grant Kira is not in love with Odo. But even if that's the case, then I think the only conclusion to draw is that she is subconsciously in love with him, that she has these romantic feelings for him but doesn't recognize them as romantic, and consciously thinks of him as a friend, but somewhere deep down actually does have more romantic feelings towards him, and just isn't aware of it. And what happens later in the show, particularly with the episode His Way, fucking Vic Fontaine, but in that episode where they first hook up, where Kira says, right before she kisses Odo, right before she agrees to, be in a romantic relationship with him, she tells Dax, I just had a moment of clarity. So it's like she's realizing something that she already knew. So that absolutely 100% backs up what I'm saying, that even if she's not aware that she's in love with him, she is subconsciously. And I think through her behavior, I think that's extremely clear. So not only is all her, the way she's written and the way she behaves before this episode indicate that, everything after, especially those later seasons when they actually do become a couple, also indicates that. So Odo's saying, oh, you definitely couldn't love me, you definitely wouldn't be in love with me, is just wrong. It's just flat out wrong. And here's the thing. You could use the unreliable narrator excuse and be like, well, maybe Odo is wrong in this case because he is maybe just has low self-esteem, and so he's letting that interfere with his usual judgment skills and letting that color it, so he believes that Kira can never love him, but in fact he's wrong. Well, I get the really strong impression that this episode is not trying to tell me that. The episode is trying to tell me that he's right by the fact that he is right about it not being Kira. And that's what the biggest, there's other things like the phaser shots in the wall not matching up and other bullshit like that. But the main thing that tipped him off was Kira saying he loved her. So it seems like the episode's trying to say that he's right. It's trying to do Necessary Evil, where they made it very clear that he could tell if people were lying and what they were saying because he could read them very well. He's like an expert of reading. I can tell you weren't crying today and stuff like that. And he could tell when people were lying or not. And it seems like that's what this episode's trying to say, that he's using those same deductive skills to figure out, aha, I can tell that you're lying. And because when Kira tries to, or when the shapeshifter tries to make up excuses, he's like, you're lying again. So he's detecting lies. So it seems like the episode is trying to tell me that when Kira said that she loved him, she was actually lying, and Odo used his great detective skills to figure out that she was lying. When in fact, not the case. It's actually, you can say she's lying because it's not really Kira, but still, from Odo's perspective, it's Kira, and he said, oh, Kira would never say this. When in fact, I think that's bullshit. I think she could say that. Now, do I think she was in love with him? No. But could she say, I'm in love with you too, after he confessed? 100%. And does she actually have some feelings for her? Is it like out of the realm of possibility that she could possibly love him? No, absolutely not. 100% not true. Everything before and everything after points to that. So that is my flaw with the episode. Not all that bullshit Armin said, but this. The reasoning that he uncovers for, figuring out that this is really a changeling is nonsense. Yeah, so other than that, I thought it was a fairly decent storyline. The reveal at the end that Kira was actually changing, I remember being kind of blown away by that. That really shocked me. I wasn't expecting that at all. And I do like how they called back that they were keeping the female changeling like in the show. Mind you, this is only her second appearance after... Well, if you count the search as 2 parts, it would be the third, but really the search is 1 part. So I didn't know that they would keep bringing this character back or not. So it was great that they did, and it's great. It kind of harpened back to the search in a lot of ways. It actually made a lot of sense because they wanted Odo back, and they could tell that Kira was what was keeping Odo with the solids, and so the storyline makes sense. So I thought, even if I disagreed with how Odo figured it out, I thought that the revelation actually made a lot of sense and was a good story. Now, as for this being like the big revelation that Odo is in love with Kira, it's the first time we hear him say that on screen. Luoxana pointed it out in the episode Fascination, and they dropped other hints in here and there, but it was supposed to be, a big step because it's the first time Odo confirms it. He actually admits, I'm in love with you, and this will be an ongoing storyline till the end of the show, really. The unrecorded aspect of it will be until season 6, but so yeah, and I think it makes sense. As I said, I think the writers picked up on the natural chemistry that existed between these 2 characters, and yeah, it was also noted that the show paid more attention to the Maquis back in the days, that they would have a storyline about Maquis chasing after them, chasing after the Maquis. It is interesting that they were returning from setting up a Bajoran outpost, sort of so they could keep in contact with Cardassia because of the new peace treaty, whatnot. So yeah, overall I thought it was decent. I thought it was good. So let's get to the B storyline. Sorry, Armin, but it is the B storyline with Nog saying that he wants to join Starfleet. So I have a lot to say about this. This is a retcon. It is. It just is. Now, whether or not you think it's a good retcon, because here's the thing, and I've said this about retcons before, they can either be good or bad. Sometimes some things need to be retconned out of existence. Like, I'm still waiting for them to retcon the Kelvin universe out of existence. I would fucking love that. And I really wanted them to retcon Wesley going off with the Travelers, like they were going to do in Nemesis, but they deleted the fucking scene. I would love some. And of course, they retconned my favorite retcon, what I think is the best retcon, of course, is retconning the bullshit they said in Turnabout Intruder about how women can't be captains in Starfleet. That's a good retcon. Very good retcon. So there can be good retcons, there can be bad retcons. And I think I can understand your mileage may vary on whether you consider this a good retcon or bad retcon. And I'm open to both interpretations, but I'm not open to people saying it's not a retcon, because it most certainly 100% objectively, factually is. Because here's the thing. And here's another thing I will say about retcons. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, they never said this wasn't the case, so as far as we know, it maybe could have been the case, it was just never brought up. That's still a retcon. If it was never brought up and they present something, I'm sorry, I'm going to use this, to me is the best example. The Guardian of Forever, what they did in Discovery by saying can transform into some dude named Carl who's reading the newspaper and it can teleport itself to other planets. Like City on the Edge Forever or even the animated series, nothing like that. Never specifically said it couldn't teleport and change its form into a dude named Carl reading the newspaper, but it never said it could, and it was highly implied that that wasn't the case, that it was presented as a portal that was created by these ancient beings, that is a stationary portal that is on this world. It's not shown to be a shapeshifter or a fucking can teleport to other planets. So it is a retcon. Like it or lump it, it most certainly is a retcon. Now, again, same thing there. Mileage may vary. Maybe you think it's a good retcon. Maybe you don't have any issue with that retcon. As I said, not all retcons are inherently bad. But, yeah. So, I bring that up with Nog because some people said, well, maybe he did really want to join Starfleet the whole time. You don't know, just because they never said it on the screen doesn't mean it's not the case. And in fact, people can make the same BS excuse for Bashir saying that he's genetically engineered, but I don't want to get into that. I'll get into that when we get to that episode, which is the worst retcon in fucking history. Although I thought there was another retcon I came across recently that I thought was worse. But anyway, I can't think of it right now. So people saying, oh, well, yeah, because as far as we know, Nog could have been wanting to join Starfleet all along, and we just didn't know about it. And this actually doesn't go against his character. Actually, it does. It goes against everything established about this character, because he was introduced in the show as, in the very first episode, the pilot episode, as a criminal. A pickpocket, a common thief, who's working with this older guy to steal shit. And Quark pretty much lets him get away with it. And throughout the show, it would bring up the fact that he would steal shit and do illegal shit. They showed him playing childish pranks, like, making people, putting like these ants on these people that make them turn blue and they freak the fuck out, so he could sit there and laugh at them. And yes, they addressed that in this episode. Because they say, oh, did he steal anything? There's some valuable stuff in the cargo bay. Sure, you want to leave him alone? So, and you might be saying, well, okay, you're being unfair, Mark. Just because someone can like steal stuff and commit crimes when they're younger and grow out of it and actually become a respectable member of, whatever organization you want to state, which is 100% true. But here's the thing. It's not just that he was shown to be a pickpocket. He was also shown in the very previous episode, in this episode that came right before this one, it was shown that he has no understanding and no respect for human behavior in Starfleet. That he's, in fact, tolerating all of Jake's disgusting habits because he just happens to think of him as a friend. But really, he thinks, oh, you Federation types are gross. Now all of a sudden he wants to join Starfleet. What? And I don't want to steal the thunder from my Patreon comments because someone will mention this later, but I'll get to it again. But I think it's important to mention. It was shown that Nog couldn't read just 2 years ago in season 1. It was shown that he couldn't read, and Jake was trying to teach him to read. Yeah, and I understand that some people can still be genius in some areas and not genius in others. Like, you have some people who are like very smart and genius in computers and other sort of electronics and engineering and stuff who are completely socially inept and just dumb as a rock when it comes to common sense or social things. Like, I get that's a thing. But you're not going to tell me, I'm sorry, you cannot get me to believe that this pickpocket thief who thinks Federation human customs, which we think are, appropriate behavior and not disgusting, he thinks they're disgusting, and he can't fucking read, just 2 years prior to this, that he's going to join Starfleet and become an engineering genius. No. I'm sorry, but no. You are stretching it. Nothing that they have shown, literally nothing that they have shown in the first 2 seasons even came close to indicating that he wanted to join Starfleet. Nothing. Now, again, the episode tries to excuse that by getting the characters to be all shocked and like, oh my god, Nog, you want to join Starfleet? What? But acknowledging and I say this all the time, just because the writers acknowledge the fault doesn't make the faults better. Like, it doesn't make it better that you're pointing out exactly why this doesn't match his character at all. And here's the thing. So it's a retcon. And again, just to be clear, I'm not passing judgment on whether or not it's a good or bad retcon. I am just stating the fact, objective fact that it is a retcon. That it absolutely 100% does not match. Now, I'm actually kind of indifferent, to be honest, whether or not this is a good or bad retcon. Because I see there being pros and cons. I see that this makes him more interesting character as a pro, because before he's just this annoying, like, particularly in the last episode when he did that bullshit about, oh, sit there and look pretty. Like, fuck you. I don't give a shit about cultural differences. But a lot of times he was a very annoying, idiotic character, like in the episode of Jim Hadar when he was saying all those stupid jokes. Maybe you're attacked by a vicious tree. Yeah, sure, this guy wants to join Starfleet, sure. But anyway, sorry. So it makes him a better, more interesting character going forward. That's a pro. Con, it makes the focus on, he becomes the main character rather than Jake. He becomes a more prominent character than Jake. And I already talked about this when the episode Shadow Play, when Jake announced he didn't want to join Starfleet. They're kind of, and the writers kind of even said in interviews that if we're not going to make Jake join Starfleet, we should make Nog join Starfleet, which is a huge mistake, because you are making this side supporting character who is supposed to be a supporting character to the main character of Jake. Now he's more important than Jake. Or at least maybe not now, but eventually, yes. Towards the end of the show, he is more of a main character than Jake is. And that's a mistake. Unless they had a plan, which clearly they did not, unless they had a plan to keep Jake as prominent and important to the show, but not be in Starfleet, then I'm sorry, they just should have made him join Starfleet. It's just the fact. Because from a narrative writing perspective, you want him to be a main character. You want him to be part of the show. And the show is about Starfleet officers and Bajoran militia, but he's not going to join the Bajoran militia. So he has to join. He does. He just does. Now, granted, there's some supporting characters who aren't in Starfleet, like Garrick and Quark, I guess you could say. He's a main character, but Quark's a totally different thing, because here's the difference with Quark. They have figured out how to make him prominent, even though he's not in Starfleet. He's still an important aspect. He, runs a black market and sometimes can help them, and he runs the bar where people hang out. So they have figured out a method to make Quark a main character and not be in Starfleet. As I said, if they had figured that out with Jake, then good. Clearly they didn't. So that way, they never should have had him not join Starfleet. And yeah, so that, to me, that's a huge downside. Now, the other thing I will say about Nog joining Starfleet is that I actually have less of a problem with it in this episode than I do in the 5th season. I believe it's the episode Ascent, if I remember correctly. I can't remember exactly which episode because it was a B storyline, so I think it was Ascent. But anyway, whatever episode it was where Nog returns from Starfleet Academy and gets posted to DS9, I'll go into way more detail about it when I get to that episode. But the person who returns to DS9 wearing a Starfleet cadet uniform, whom the other characters refer to as Nog, whom was played by Aaron Eisenberg, is not Nog. It is a different character. It is not even remotely the same character at all. And I think they're insulting my intelligence by trying to pass it off as if it was the same character. And it's basically this new character, let's call him Bog, who will be with the show for the rest of the show. So essentially, sometime between season 4 and 5, Nog dies and Bog is reborn. Now, and again, I'll address this when I get to the episode, but I feel the need to at least say something about it right now. Because I know what the obvious excuse is, and I hear this excuse all of the time, and it's weak, and it really irritates me, and I know people will say that in response to this. Oh, but he was a teenager, and he grew. People can mature. People can grow. Now, here's the thing. That's true. That is true, 100%. People can mature and grow and become different and have different things. Let me use this example. Because I think a part in my life, I think is a very good thing to highlight. When I was 18 years old, I would smoke weed almost practically every day. I delivered pizza, and on my free time, I ate a lot of fast food, hung out with my friends. We got stoned. We played childish pranks every once in a while. I remember jumping on the back of a moving car and falling off and almost getting severely hurt by doing that. And I got fucking arrested for trying to shoplift, which is something, idiotic. I regret. So that's me as 18. And I smoked cigarette. I used to smoke 1 pack, maybe 2 packs a day, cigarettes. So that's me at 18. And I drink. If I wasn't getting stoned, I was drinking. Constantly getting drunk, trying to get my hands on alcohol or weed or whatever I could. Party, have a good time. So that's me at 18. Now let's jump to me at 20. 2 years later. Only 2 years. Only 2 years later. I was married. I no longer hung out with all those people I used to hang out with. I only smoked weed on a rare occasion, not practically every day like I used to. Same thing with drinking. Hardly ever, usually just casual drink for dinner every once in a while. Did not smoke at all. No smoking whatsoever. Didn't do childish pranks. By the way, the other thing is I became a vegetarian. When I was 18, I was, as I said, eating McDonald's and burgers and shit. And 20, I was a vegetarian. I was exercising, out being healthy, and trying to be more mature and be more responsible with my money, and was traveling the world. I went to New Zealand. I traveled around the U.S., where when I was 18, I was just here in Maryland doing nothing, just sitting around smoking weed. So, sounds like two different people, doesn't it? Sounds like, wow, I made such a massive change in only 2 years. But here's the thing. I was still me. Anyone who interacted with me didn't think, oh, wow, you're a totally different person. They think, oh, you're Mark. You're the same person. You have the same sense of humor. You have the same attitude. You have the same sort of outlook on life. Hanging out with you is just the same. You still have still love root beer, still love Star Trek. Like a lot of, still listen to Smashing Pumpkins and alternative rock music. You like all these things about you. You're still you. You're still me. I'm still me. I was still Mark. I was still the same person, even though so many things about me had changed because I'd matured in just 2 years. And that is my point with Nog. Just because you mature in 2 years does not mean you become an entirely new fucking different person, which is exactly what happened to Nog in Season 5. This is not the same character at all. So don't give me this bullshit about, oh, he's matured, people can mature. Yes, it is true, but that's not what we're saying. That is not what we're saying. What we're saying is a totally different character. Sorry, and I will have to bring this up again when we get to that episode. I think is Ascent, but I felt the need, and I'll get into more detail about it then, but I felt the need to address it here because this is where it starts. This is where it starts. And to be fair, for the first couple episodes, he is still Nog. Until he goes off to the academy, and then Nog dies, and Bog returns. I'm going to probably call him Bog from now on when we get to there. But anyway, sorry. And no, yeah, it's beyond people maturing. People, when they mature, are still them. This character is not Nog at all. But anyway, so to me, that's actually a worse retcon, is my point, that episode than this one. But this is still a retcon. As I said, I'm a bit mixed on whether or not it's good or bad. That other one is definitely bad. It's terrible because it essentially is not the same character at all. So the other thing I will say about this storyline is that Nog isn't the only character who's retconned in it. Rom is also 100% retconned in this storyline. This is the storyline where they officially switch him over from being the idiotic, dastardly, conniving, ooh, I just want the brother's bar, and ooh, I'd be willing to throw him out the airlock, and I'm going to scheme to get it, and I'm conniving, oh, you man! He goes from that to lovable, kind of like I was saying before, like no common sense, kind of dumb in social situations, but engineering genius. 100% a retcon. He was not, and this is the official. So they do 2 for 1 retcon with this storyline. Retcon Nog and retcon Rom. Because here's the thing. Now, granted, with Rom, they were gradually changing him. But this is where we get the sharp turn. I think this is where I'm drawing that this is the official line of when they officially change him, when he changes over from conniving, despicable Rom to lovable, dumb, genius Rom. This is where it happens. And to be fair, I like this retcon. I think he's a much better character. I love the dumb, lovable genius Rom way better than I hated the conniving Rom, so I can see why they did it. But again, let's call a spade here. This is a retcon. Now, granted, there were some episodes that hinted at Rom's genius, such as necessary evil when he was like very good at picking all these locks and stuff, but that doesn't portray him as an engineering genius. There might have been an episode where he fixed like the engineering on something, but for the most part, especially in season 1, and I called this out when I saw it, they portrayed him as a moron, not just in common sense, but also in engineering. What is Odo's exact phrase? Rom couldn't fix a straw if it were bent. Now, you could try, if you try to want to fit the, square peg into a circular hole, you could try to be like, oh, well, Odo was just wrong. Here's the thing. If Odo was wrong, then Odo would be out of character, because Odo is not wrong about judging people's characters. He's always right. That's in his character. So Odo's not wrong. I'm sorry. He's not. It's just that he was right that Rom was an idiot and couldn't fix the straw if it was bent. It's just the writers retconned him and changed him, so now all of a sudden he's an engineering genius. And that began in this episode. As I said, they might have hinted at, he actually is kind of good. Like they were already retconning him being a complete idiot before this episode. But this is, again, the sharp turn where he's all of a sudden an engineering genius. This was never mentioned before. It was not mentioned, and it's so the whole story is a retcon. Like Nog's whole reasoning for wanting to join Starfleet is because I don't want to end up like my father. He could be the chief engineer on a starship. Since fucking when? That is not the character that we've been seeing for 2.5 seasons. I'm sorry, just flat out, objectively, factually was not. So this is a 2 for retcon, but actually, I'm more positive about the Rom retcon than I am about the Nog retcon, but objectively, factually, they are both retcons. So believe it or not, I have another huge issue with this whole thing, another huge flaw with it. So Nog tells Sisko that I don't want to be like my father because my father doesn't have the lobes for earning profit, and he feels like he's the same way. He doesn't have the lobes for earning profit, and a Ferengi with no profit is no Ferengi at all. Now let's leave aside, because I already addressed the retcon, they have clearly showed that Nog does indeed have the lobes for business. They showed this several times, like in season 1 when he traded stuff to get more stuff, and the fact that he was good at stealing stuff. So but again, as I said, I already addressed the retcon aspect. That's not what I'm going to talk about now, but just so you know, that's also a retcon. But let's take the episode at its word. Even though it's widely inconsistent with what came before it, that Rom is an engineering genius, but he doesn't have the lobes for business, and Nog also doesn't have the lobes for business. Here is my issue. There's many ways to earn profit beyond simply being a salesman. If you're a skilled engineer, like, just forget about the freaking Star Trek setting. Let's just right now. If you're a skilled engineer and you're able to like build airplanes and build other stuff, like even cars, like you can earn a good profit. And this is the thing that really bothers me about Deep Space Nine's portrayal of Ferengis, because everyone always says how Deep Space Nine made the Ferengis so much better than Next Gen, which is true for the most part. But the problem I have with Deep Space Nine's portrayal of the Ferengi is it treats them like a monoculture. It treats them as all simply used car salesmen, and that's all they are. Whereas Next Gen, at the very least, showed more in their limited way. It showed more diversity with the skill set within the Ferengi. For example, Deep Space Nine seems to completely and utterly forget that the Ferengi have military vessels, or at least I don't know if they ever stated outright that they're military, but they're vessels that are just as complex, powerful, and has as much speed as Starfleet ships. Like, they can go toe to toe with Starfleet ships, like we see with the Battle of the Stargazer. And Deep Space Nine seems to utterly forget about this, and I'll talk about this more when we get to Magnificent Ferengi. Great episode, but utterly disregards everything Next Generation portrayed of Ferengi. But anyway, so my point is, when Nog says, oh, my father could have been chief engineer on a starship, then why the fuck wasn't he? It's not like he needs to join Starfleet to become a chief engineer. Ferengi vessels need engineers because they're vessels that travel at warp and they do everything that Starfleet ships do. Who the fuck's operating the engine room? Could you dare say that they need a chief engineer? Or at least some kind of engineer on the ship? So if Rom's such an engineering genius and could be an engineer, then why the fuck isn't he? Why the fuck isn't he serving on a Ferengi ship as chief engineer? Now you could say, oh, well, it's because Quark, bottled him in and wouldn't let him grow and kept him as his own personal minion. Okay, sure. But that has nothing to... That's not what Nog is saying right here. Nog is not saying, oh, my uncle just, wouldn't let my father grow. He's saying Ferengi culture wouldn't let my father grow, which is not true. And this gets to my larger issue that I have with the Ferengi being portrayed as a monoculture is, and I talked about this a bit in the episode Suspicions where we saw a Ferengi scientist. He's like, oh, I was kind of exiled by my people because they don't like scientists, which doesn't make sense because scientists can earn profit just like engineers can. And in fact, that guy was an inventor, inventing new innovative technology that even other species of the Alpha Quadrant didn't have, so he could make tons of money off of that. I don't earn profit. It comes at it from this false perspective that only businessmen can earn profit, which is look at modern society. Plenty of people have jobs where they earn money that is not a salesman. The people who fucking wrote this episode are earning money in a way that's not a salesman. I don't understand this. Oh, well, he, no Ferengi without profit, he can't earn profit. The fuck he can't. If he has this genius of an engineer, which again is retcon, but if he has this genius of an engineer, as you say he is, then fuck yeah, he should be out there earning tons of profit. He should be working on the Ferengi ship, being the chief engineer, and getting paid a salary for doing so. And again, Ferengi need to have their own culture. They can't exist. This is the whole thing about monocultures. They do the same shit with Klingons saying, oh, they're all warriors. Bullshit. You need to have accountants, as I talked about. You need to have other doctors, lawyers. Same thing with the Ferengis. There need to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, scientists in order for their culture to society to function. They need to have all this shit. And you can't say, oh, well, it doesn't make sense for the culture to have scientists and doctors and engineers. The fuck it doesn't. I mean, just look at the United States and their medical system and how fucking greedy that is. Well, it's not the doctors themselves, to be fair. It's the insurance agencies, but still. You could imagine that the Ferengi have a system like that. You can imagine that the doctors show up and be like, oh yes, I think I know what's wrong with you. And the Ferengi looks at him and he goes, so then the Ferengi gives him some money. So what's wrong with you? Of course they need to have doctors, scientists, engineers. So this irritates me when they're like, oh, he's not good at being a salesman, therefore he's no Ferengi at all. Bullshit. This society cannot function if it worked that way. But anyway. So I'd now like to thank all those that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. This helped me continue with my channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Antarius, Jordan Johnson, and Brandon Neilhouse. Thank you also very, very much for your strong support. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Miglasio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you also very, very much for your support. So, we do have a few patron comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "Heart of Stone, more like Fart of Sloan." I'm sorry about that one. I sincerely regret that one. It wasn't funny, just lazy. And you know what sucks? I have a bit to say about this episode. The stuff with fake Kira and Odo in the cave. It's really dumb. I guess it's when we finally hear Odo admit his feelings for Kira to the audience. But more interesting to me is the stuff on the station where Nog finally admits he doesn't want to end up like his father. It's heartbreaking. Rom is such an honorable and good guy, but he's a lousy Ferengi. Thankfully, that won't happen to Nog because as of this episode, Nog is officially in Starfleet. Well, actually, to be nitpicky here, he actually isn't in Starfleet yet. It's not until he goes to the academy, and even then, he's more of like a cadet. I guess you could say he's in Starfleet then, but it's not until they give him a field promotion of ensign that he's officially in Starfleet. But that's, again, I'm picking nits here. By the way, Fart of Sloan, I actually like that. I think that's a really good one. I don't know what Sloan has anything to do with this episode, but that's still, I still like it. Alright, so next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "If Nog and Jake weren't friends, I wouldn't buy Nog wanting to be in Starfleet. However, they are. Jake was a good influence on Nog. I could go on, but I know you're on the other side of this debate. The other plot is absolute shit, and what is happening? The screen is going fuzzy. Welcome to Pitch Meeting Part 2, a follow-up to Shadow Play." Okay, so let me interrupt. Before I do this, he has like another pitch meeting. Last time when he did a pitch meeting comment for Shadow Play, I did the whole 9 yards, like dressed in different costumes, shot it from two different angles, did the background, did the ambient noise in the background, and filmed it like a pitch meeting. However, I won't be doing that again because I recently filmed a couple of those that I myself wrote, and very time consuming, and I thought it was worthwhile, but it took up way too much of my time, so unfortunately I don't really want to do that again. I did one for Data Lore, which you can check out on my Data Lore Revisited if you haven't seen it. And I did a couple for Patreon, so if you're a Patreon supporter, you can check them out. And I probably will release those eventually as part of a larger video, eventually. But yeah, so I just did 3 of them, and it was like very exhausting. I just don't want to put in the effort, and I will read what Stephen Kennedy wrote. I'm not going to make adjustments. Last time for Shadow Play, I sort of made adjustments to the script. I'm not going to do that this time because, again, being lazy. And I might maybe do something funky with the backgrounds or something. I can't. I'm not using a green screen. Oh, well, I'm not even going to do that. So I'm just going to do the voices. And so, yeah. Anyway, welcome to Pitch Meeting Part 2, a follow-up to Shadow Play. The writer storms into an executive meeting and starts shouting, saying, "You stole my idea about Nog wanting to join Starfleet as I fecked up with Jake as we have really nothing for him to do on the show. Hey, why do you guys look all the same? You do realize that you wrote both stories. Oh, crap. I hope you wouldn't realize that. So what else happened in this episode? Well, Cisco gives Nog a task. Oh, I see. How difficult is it for Nog? Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Basically, he asked Nog to do a stock take. Aren't Ferengi just glorified accountants? What did he do? What next did he ask Nog to do? A monthly payroll? Sir, Starfleet don't pay wages as there's no money on Earth. Sir, are you okay? It looks like you're thinking again. Sorry, what? I was thinking. Did Gene Roddenberry think about the other races that are in Starfleet? It's discrimination, I say. How does Miles and Julian pay for drinks and food at Quark's or even shop at Garrick's? I don't know. Please get off my back. I guess the writers don't communicate with each other. Well, I wrote the best part of the episode, and Ira Stephen Bear wanted to make Romancing the Stone 3, but with a twist that the stone was really a changeling. We could get Michael Douglas to play the changeling. He is in Wales asking for Catherine Zeta-Jones' parents' permission. Could he marry her? Catherine Zeta-Jones' parents they live under the sea as Wales? No, sir. Wales is a country in the UK. Right. So Jake won't be on the show much anymore. Well, we are writing a script that Jake will lose his father and we will see him grow up to be a very old man. We can get Tony Todd to play the older version of Jake. Sir, I don't think Sarah Laughlin will like that. Who's that? The person who plays Jake on the show. No, Tony Todd is the man. He is going to play him, okay? That is what happens for ruining my pitch meeting with identical triplet brothers. So my rating my rating is a 5. Part 3 of pitch meeting may happen if I feel like it out of 10. Yeah. Again, apologizing for half-assing that, but yeah. So there we go. So here's the thing. There's something in here about money. Yeah, Federation using money. There's actually an explanation. I watched a video that kind of explained this. I think it was AI generated, but maybe a human might have wrote it and just had AI narrate it. But anyway, because it made a good point, even though it's not canon, it's more of head canon, but still makes sense to me, that the Starfleet and the Federation do have currency. They do have a form of currency, but they only use it to trade with other cultures that use currency. And therefore, like for example, Starfleet officers who live on outposts where money is used, such as DS9, they technically have a salary, they get a payroll, but it's only used for trading with other cultures, and the other cultures recognize this as legal tender because it's allocated depending on what kind of job they're doing. So in Starfleet you'll get paid a certain amount, so the Starfleet officers can use that money to pay for their drinks and whatnot. So that makes sense for me. Now granted, the episode in the cards kind of contradicts this because Jake says I don't have any money. Well, Jake's not in Starfleet, so he doesn't have a job, so maybe that's why he doesn't have any money. But he says, oh, it's because Federation's above money. And he's like, Nog's like, well, if you don't need money, you don't need mine. But yeah, that kind of contradicts this, but I think that's the only way that would make sense. I think you are correct that the writers never really thought about it and just conveniently write in money when it makes sense for them, but then say the Federation doesn't have money. And a lot of it is because of a lot of the writers, particularly on Deep Space Nine, like Ronald D. Moore and Ira Stephen Bear, didn't understand nor agree with Roddenberry's vision for a moneyless future, which I disagree with because I wholeheartedly agree with that vision. But I think that this that workaround that the AI video came up with, again, probably written by a human being, at least I think it was, but because I don't think an AI would come up with something like that. But I don't know, you never know, they're getting smarter. But but I think it makes sense. I think that definitely makes sense for the story. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buchwald. He says, the problem of an A story is to simply approach the story / plot is this. The female changeling wanting to get to know more of Odo lures him and Kira to a moon with a fake Maquis ship. Guess she was on the ship? And then after kidnapping and putting Kira in stasis, pretends to be Kira, acted well as the not quite Kira by Nana visitor. Good point. And via many questions gets to know more about Odo, with the audience does as well. Until Odo, with his usual detective techniques and observations, figure out that she is not Kira, and after being found out, retreats sort of like most villains and say basically, well, Kira never loved you, ha ha. Yeah, that last part is how it comes across, and for such continuity, the audience, I'm sure, learning a lot of Odo, acted well by Renee. It ends up being mainly corny and disappointing and actually not quite the best rewatch. Now for the B story, which I know and understand what you're going to say. This is almost a retcon of Nog. No, almost about it. But anyway, I'll continue. This is almost a retcon of Nog, although I would argue sometimes the DS9 writers come up with new ideas and don't realize for such a character change we need to see growth. Maybe over a series or an episode, maybe a couple times we actually see Rom at Nog's critical concern moments and see him react or say something moody about Rom, with perhaps some introspective around Jake. Instead, up until now, Nog was comic relief and a prankster and ignorant, especially since just one episode before we saw Nog being a true ass and a misogynist, and even somewhat at times unbearable if it wasn't at least also comical. And only telling and not showing, we are suddenly thrown to the character who wants to turn around and join Starfleet. Aaron Eisenberg's acting when he breaks down in front of Sisko actually outshines Renee's acting in the same episode. And definitely going forward, the version of Nog is who we see. It's where was that growth. And unlike Bashir or Sisko, who had retcons, this particular instance did not need to be retconish after planned over a number of episodes. So it's a flawed episode, but good enough that I'll give it 7 Louis Louis of O'Brien's favorite sea shanty. Okay, that's a good point that you make about gradually introducing, and part of the reason why retcons feel like retcons is because they come out of nowhere and are not built up to. I think, and I talked about this before in many other videos, Ronald D. Moore is infamous for doing this. Even though I love him as a writer, he has that flaw where he has this instinct where he wants to instantly change characters without building up to it. But here's the thing, though. I think even had they done this, let's say at the start of season 3, they started building storylines with Nog and started building the fact that his father was an engineering genius and that he was being, misused by Quark and Nog didn't appreciate it, and then started maybe showing his appreciation for Starfleet. And didn't do the last week's episode where he acted like a misogynistic ass. Instead, they started building him more towards becoming more like Nog. Then it would have worked better. I will agree. I would have been a lot more palatable if they did it that way. But it would still be a retcon. Sorry. It would, because the character we got in season 1 and 2 is a different character. And again, the whole character growth, mature, doesn't really... No, it doesn't explain it. He can't read! He can't read in season 1. You can't tell me that someone who can't read is going to become is good enough to join Starfleet 2 years later. Absolutely not. Nothing can make this character fit. It is an absolute retcon, even if they tried to build up to it in season 3. That is my stance. And then the previous comment, Steven mentioned that it's not a retcon because Nog and Jake were friends. But the thing is, Nog doesn't even use Jake as a motivation for wanting to join Starfleet. I mean, you could say, yeah, he learned about Starfleet and the Federation through Jake. But again, it doesn't counter all that other stuff about him that showed that he had no interest, in fact was absolutely not Starfleet material. It doesn't override any of that. All that stuff is still there. So any way you try to slice it, it is most definitely a retcon. So the other thing you mentioned is the scene where Sisko yells at him and he says, "I don't want to be like my father." And Aaron Eisenberg is in an interview, I think it was in a documentary, talked about how he thought that was his best piece of acting, and that Avery Brooks they didn't rehearse that he would grab him and yell at him, and that kind of really worked for him and got him motivated, and he thought that was some of the best acting he's done. It's not bad acting. I definitely won't say that it's bad. And okay, I will say it's good, but I don't think it's that great. I don't think it's like duet levels, or that's too high of a standard. But I don't think it's like, I wouldn't pinpoint it as some of the best acting in the show. Let me put it that way. It's good. It works for the moment. I think part of what hampers me is that I don't buy that whole thing about I don't want to be like my father, because that's a retcon that comes out of nowhere. I think that's my hamper, and I do think that writing can impact acting, because it doesn't come off as sincere to me, because it doesn't actually fit. And the whole thing with Avery Brooks, and when I was just watching this episode, when he grabs him, he's like, "Tell me, I want to know!" I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, calm down. Like, he's just a kid. Like, that was way too over the top. And it's even worse when I learned that that wasn't even the direction he was giving. He just decided to do that. Like, I get that Aaron Eisenberg, that really worked for him and got him hyped and had him like give that energetic response. But it still doesn't work in the sense of storytelling for Sisko's character. Like, why are you being such an ass? Why would you just yell and grab him and shake him and tell me I want to know? Like, that's way too over the top. Just my opinion. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, "This episode is a mixed bag. I don't mind the Nog retcon, and his interactions with Sisko are kind of sweet. I think the Kira trapped in a rock plot is kind of cheesy. They could have figured out some other way to put her in danger, and that rock crystal looked cheap and wacky. I do like this episode kind of starts, the Odo is gruff and stoic on the outside, but secretly tortured on the inside theme. I also liked and identified with the unrequited love motif that would continue until almost the end of the show. The biggest strength of this episode for me is that it reveals new information about the Founders. I remember first watching this episode as a kid and totally being shocked by the fact that the changelings can perfectly mimic individual humanoids. I just had assumed up to that point they were all unskilled as Odo at doing human faces, so I remember the twist at the end being a game changer for me and making it super excited for what was to come with the changelings. You know, that's a good point, because this is the first episode that really shows that the changelings can imitate humanoids exactly, and I would get why you would think that they are incapable of doing so, because the way they appear in the search, they look like Odo, who is just, and Odo looks that way because he can't imitate humanoid faces exactly. And that's a complaint they have. That's why do they look that way? And the answer is they do that to sort of relate to Odo, because they're trying to relate to him, so they want to look like him. But of course, that excuse falls apart in season 7 when we get a lot of scenes with the changeling hanging out with the Dominion. Has Odo is nowhere to be found, and yet she's still looking like that. So then the excuse starts to fall apart. But it's just for the audience. That's the real answer. It's for the audience, so they know that they're the same species as Odo. But that's a good point. That this is a game changer. That is the first episode that really showed that changelings could imitate humanoids. And I remember when I first saw it, I had assumed that they could. So I wasn't surprised. I was like, that makes sense. But it was still a confirmation. Because as you say, the show had never stated it before. So I took it as so now I know that I was right, that the changelings can imitate human form. Exactly. Now, as for the rock crystal being a dumb prop, I never noticed stuff like that. It looks fine to me. I didn't have any issues with it. But that is something that a lot of the people involved with the show talked about, and they hated. Ira Steven Bear had a quote saying that it's that episode with that piece of shit prop that looks terrible. So yeah, I mean, if they feel that way, I didn't. And the Delta Flyers also had a huge issue with it. Oh, it looks so terrible. I didn't notice anything, but I don't know. I just don't notice stuff like that most of the time. Unless you're going to do the original series and do like a Windex spray bottle. Use that as poison. I don't really care. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howes, who says, if I was as clever as Norman Buckwald, I would write my thoughts to the tune of the Blondie song Heart of Glass, but I know my limitations. Here's the first appearance of Odo, the angsty teenie. He is annoyed that Kira didn't ask him to dinner she didn't think he'd enjoy anyway. Which sounds like how I would react, to be honest. I found the whole Odo and Kira in the cave plot boring, very badly written, and as for the crystal in which poor claustrophobic Nana visitor is encased for the majority of the episode, I have not seen such a terrible prop in Star Trek since the rock monster with claws in the Savage Curtain. It has been asked why the female changeling didn't kill Kira. I think that happened. Odo would have totally rejected the founders. Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. To my mind, the Nog story is so much better. I think Nog didn't tell Jake about his plan to join Starfleet because he was afraid that Jake would think it was a joke. Sisko grabbing Nog and shaking him reminded me of a similar scene in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Odo romancing the stone. Meh. 5 Ferengi bosses saying, of course it's your fault. Everything that goes wrong here is your fault. It says so in your contract. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like those Quark being a dick lines. I don't know. They just don't really do it for me. I know it's some people find it funny, not that they're cheering Quark on, but still. I get it, but I just don't find it funny personally. So if you had done something in the tune of Heart of Glass, I would have to look up that song and listen to it several times to prepare to sing it, because I've never heard of that song before either. So it's a good thing you didn't make me do, because I just did it not that long ago for Fascination. So yeah, good thing you didn't make me. People make me do pitch meetings and make me sing songs, so just let me read a comment. Anyway, I know I choose to do it, but and I can choose to do a half-assed job like I did with the pitch meeting thing just now. But anyway, so I disagree that this is the first appearance of Odo the Angsty Teen. That was the episode, the alternate, where Maura Pole came on the station. He was totally being an angsty teen that whole episode. He was like, fuck you, Dad! Fuck you! You didn't raise me properly! Screw you, Dad! He was so being an angsty teen in that episode. And I think, and I didn't keep track, but I'm pretty sure we got scenes like this before where he was being nitpicky about something dumb. But this one's definitely worse than any of the ones that came before it. But again, I would just say maybe the second appearance of the Odo the Angsty Teen, at the very least. Yeah, everyone hates that prop. I just did not notice that. I don't know what's wrong with me, why I don't have an issue with props, but yeah. And yeah, I agree with you about why the female changeling didn't kill Kira. I mean, I think here's my guess, and the episode doesn't state it, but my guess is if her plan had worked and Odo had left them behind, that the female changeling still wouldn't have killed Kira, that they would have took her back to the Dominion and, like, brainwashed her or freaking, sucked her memories to try to get, like, information or whatever, maybe put her in that prison that Martok will eventually be in. But that's just my guess. It's total guess, total headcanon. I don't know for sure certain about that. I don't remember Goblet of Fire. I'm imagining it's Dumbledore shaking Harry Potter. Because I don't know those movies very well. I've only seen them once. I've never been a big Potter head, and especially refuse to watch them now. With the whole J.K. Rowling thing, will not support her at all, even if it's just stuff that's adapted from her work. No, fuck that shit. But anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, Nog wanting to join Starfleet is such a massive retcon. If I think about the difficult tests Wesley had to take in the first season of TNG, it is very unbelievable how Nog, who struggled learning to read, could ever pass these tests. The way Odo confesses his love to Kira reminds me strongly of the way Tom and B'Elanna got together. The whole storyline was unbelievable, and the test didn't make much sense to me. Next week on DS9, Morn also wants to apply to Starfleet Academy, and the crew discovers a cave without a perfectly flat surface. My rating is 6 out of 10. I was thinking when Lower Decks did an episode Caves, and they did all the cave cliches about all the Star Trek episodes that did caves, and when I reviewed that episode, I think I underestimated how many episodes actually have caves in it. I was like, I tried to name them all, and I only named like 4 or 5. I think there's like tons of them that I missed. Like this one, for example, I didn't think of this. There's tons I just wouldn't think, but yeah, they did use that cave set a lot. A lot. And on Delta Flyers, the actors talk about how that was there the whole time, and that Voyager and Deep Space Nine would both use it from time to time. But yeah. And I loved, like, the Lower Decks episode had the thing. It's like, well, how come every time we go to a cave it all looks exactly the same? It's because it's the same set. Yeah, that was funny. Yes, and you bring up a really good point about Wesley. So, here's the thing. You're referring to the episode Coming of Age. And when I reviewed that episode, I talked about how the tests Wesley makes didn't make any sense. And it's dangerous, the shit that they're doing. But moreover, how they have 4, like, highly skilled and perfectly acceptable students. And only one of them can go to Starfleet Academy. Now, granted, they say if you failed, you can apply again, which eventually Wesley gets in. But that still seems like it's like nearly impossibly hard to get into Starfleet. And the fact that Nog, who, as you mentioned, couldn't even read to 2 years ago and doesn't espouse any of the principles that Starfleet stands for, it's impossible for me to believe that holding up to that standard that he would have any chance in hell of getting into Starfleet. Now, you could say, well, Coming of Age was an impossible standard, so let's retcon that out of existence. I'm happy to do that. I agree that the coming of age standard is impossible, and I'm glad to get rid of it. But the thing is, whether I like it or not, it exists. The precedent is there. And so for them to say Nog can get into Starfleet contradicts that. Therefore is a retcon. Another reason. Another reason why it's the retcon. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Heart of Stone out of 10, it's going to be a 7. Very good. I always thought this episode was fine. It's not terrible. As I said, I think the Odo plot is interesting. I love the shock reveal with the changeling. I think that really works. It has greater implications for the show. I think Nana Visitor and Renee Auberginois do a really good job. The only issue I have with that storyline, like, I don't give a shit about the prop. Prop looks fine to me. But the only issue I have with that storyline is the Odo figuring out that it's not Kira, saying, oh, she could never love me, because that is categorically not true. That's just not true any way you slice it. So that's the only thing that bothers. Everything else about the storyline I think is fine and actually interesting. Now, the B plot, which Armin, it is the B plot, I have a lot of issues with. I mean, overall, it's fine. I mean, if they had introduced new characters and did the storyline, then I would have thought it was a good storyline. But the fact that it so contradicts everything we know about these characters, I'm sorry, I can't look past that. It bothers me, and I just can't look past. I just can't look past the fact that it's a retcon. And as I said, I don't even think it's a terrible retcon. Because it does make Nog a more interesting character, and they make Rom a more interesting character. But I just can't accept what I'm seeing here because it so contradicts everything that came before it. So 7 out of 10 for this one. So that is it for my review of Heart of Stone. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, you can leave a comment, tell me how wrong I am about Nog. And if you really want to support the channel, you could support me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below. I have different tiers. I have different rewards, such as I do a patron-only series where I revisit reviews I've already done exclusively for my Patreon supporters, and many other goodies as well. You can check out if you're so inclined. Let's see what is coming up next on the old channel here. Wednesday, I'll be doing a patron requested video ranking all of the Teen GQ episodes. Thursday, I'll be reviewing the Voyager episode Phage. I always want to say the Phage, but apparently it's just Phage. And Saturday, reviewing the DS9 episode Destiny. And then Monday, I'm going to leave Star Trek just for a second to review Season 2 of Severance, which, as I'm recording this, I'm about 6 episodes through, and god damn, I am loving this season. So looking forward to reviewing this season as a whole. So that is what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager and many other Star Trek videos and videos on other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.